Hello and welcome to today's webinar, How are you driving your business forward? Evaluate and optimize your systems for business success. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items around today's event. First, you will notice a Q&A box to the left of the slide area. This is where you can type your questions at any point during the presentation. Questions will be answered during the Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. Also, you will notice below the slide area is a resource section where we have a link to today's presentation as well as other relevant resources. Please feel free to download a copy for yourself or others in your organization that may not have been able to attend. At the end of the webinar, you will see a survey box come up with a request for completion. This survey will only take a few minutes and your feedback is greatly appreciated as it will help us continue to bring you great content for future webinars. With that, I'd like to hand it over to our speaker for today. Bill, do you want to kick us off?
Awesome, sure do. Thank you guys for attending today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are today. I'm excited about this topic. It's something that's near and dear to my heart. It's been something I've been doing for 10 years here at SAP Concur. I use crawl, walk, run a lot. I use the terms go from good to great a lot because we're not just looking to solve business problems. We're looking to take things that are going well and expand on them moving forward. I look at it as a value perspective. That's what I talk to clients about. I want to use those two terms and actually identify them. Value being the material or monetary worth of something, or the worth of something compared to the price or effort outlaid. That's the definition I'm going to focus on. I'm going to repeat it a couple of times because for me, it's all about the give versus the get. You may hear me say, is the juice worth the squeeze? Because we don't want to improve just for the sake of improving. We have to do it for the right reasons. And we have to go into it with an understanding that this is worthwhile. So a lot of what we're going to focus on today is that equation of value. The word perspective is there because there's a lot of unknowns, there's a lot of challenges. And we're going to talk about some of the things we don't know. And that's going to lead us to say, let's be reasonable. Let's not try and make the problem bigger or worse than it really is. Let's be reasonable. Let's figure out, is this worth solving for? The agenda today is I'm going to talk a little bit about the business outcomes and kind of how I see things, how I measure things, high level of how Concur impacts these items. Now we're actually going to do a financial value exercise I'm pretty excited about. I'm going to invite you to send questions in throughout the presentation and make this as interactive as possible. In fact, with that regard, we're going to start with the poll question next. And it's this: when we talk about business challenges, what do you see as your biggest business challenge? Increasing policy compliance, improving data visibility, employee enablement, eliminating redundancies and inefficiencies, or building a scalable infrastructure? I'm going to give this some time. Feel free to think through these. Pick which one of these are the most important for you right now. There's no wrong answers. And we're going to have a couple of other poll questions throughout here, keeping in mind that we all learn from this as well. I'd be real curious to see which of these are most answered. I will tell you, I feel like they're all combined. They're all related, and real often you see these, you say, I can't do one without the other. So I'm just going to give it a couple of seconds here yet for you guys to weigh in. I see a scale. I see a lot of you have answered this question already. If you haven't, please pick one, and we can then compile those answers and take a look at them. And it'll give me a chance to take a drink here. And more than half have answered already, so I'm going to go ahead and advance it. Let's take a look at the numbers of what we see. Increasing compliance. First, number 2 is eliminating redundancies and efficiencies, which is really interesting for me because we're going to see on the next slide these two items are number 1 and number 2 on my list as well. And a lot of these other ones are going to feed right into that. So like I said before, there are no wrong answers at all. One of the things I'm going to focus on now is we're going to start with compliance, since that's the number 1 answer, and it's also kind of high on my list of things to do. I take compliance a little differently than some, and I look at these two main business outcomes of effectiveness and efficiency. And let's start with effectiveness, optimizing the quality of spend. When I talk to Concur clients, we always talk about compliance or non-compliance. And I always pause there and say, it's more than that, though. Yes, we want people following the rules, But even if they're following the rules, we want quality of spend. We want to reduce the amount of bad spend that's happening. We want to remove errors, duplications, omissions, all of these things. We want to spend our money as wisely as possible. And I kind of flow all that up into this bucket called efficiency, where policy compliance is a key component of it. Interesting that the second lead number in that poll was basically efficiency, reducing redundancies and increasing efficiency. I have a lot of clients that say, hey, I just want to spend my money wisely. I don't really care about efficiency, but here's the reality of it for me. This is where that equation comes in, the worth of something compared to the price or effort outlaid. Yes, we want to be more effective. Yes, we want to reduce fraud. Yes, we want to reduce mistakes. But how much time are we spending doing that? And is it worth it? Is the effort, is the give versus the get, which is a key conversation we're going to have today. And for me, the best way to determine this is to say, well, where are we right now? If we're going to talk about improvement, where are we right now? And this is where it gets kind of hard, because here's the answer. A lot of us don't know. A lot of us have not done a time study to say, how long does this process take us? Are there inefficiencies? Are there things we can do better? And I think we can all acknowledge, if we knew where errors were happening, we'd stop them. If we knew where bad behavior was happening, we'd stop them. And it leads us to this old phrase, what you don't know can't hurt you. I would argue that's opposite. What you don't know can hurt you. And a lot of our focus today is going to be on what don't you know? Because insight is a really important part of what we do. And we're going to break that down in a little bit. Let's move into poll question number 2, though. Of the business outcomes I just talked about, improving decision-making, improving travel and spend behavior, reducing errors, reducing risk, reducing fraud, give us the top 2. Which 2 of these are the most important? And again, hopefully you're looking at all of these and saying, yeah, these all matter to our organization. We're going to give it a little pause here for you guys to answer this question. Please go ahead and submit your responses here, and we'll walk through them together as a group and see. Just like the last question, I see a lot of these are related, and we're going to walk through that once we get the responses completed here and see how this all shakes out for the whole group. So I'm going to pause just a second here for some more responses. All right, we've got a fair amount of responses here, so let's go ahead and click ahead and let's see what we've got here. Improve decision-making, number 2. Improve behavior, number 1. Reduce errors, and then reduce risk. Once again, as I stated, I don't see any one of these as being right or wrong, and I do see them all as related. And we're going to kind of talk about how they all kind of come together as we go through this. All right. Next slide is this. And this, we're going to take a little step back and kind of focus in on what exactly do we have with Concur and how do we optimize this? So I look at the travel tool, I look at our expense tool, I look at our invoice tool, I look at our company bill statement, our P-card tool, I look at meeting and event spend, all these different spends happening. The beauty of SAP Concur, as you know, is they all come together. They all come together in one place. And the beauty for me is, again, I'm going to talk about insight a lot today. We get insight that helps us drive our behavior in these areas. I'm going to share 5 specific areas that we all know. If we have Concur, we know these are true, but I want to make a couple of observations about them. Let's start with automation. 2 points I want to make on automation. Number 1 is oftentimes we hear the word automation and we think efficiency. It's going to make things quicker. And that's certainly true, but I'm going to challenge you when you see automation, to look at it a different way. Yes, it makes us more efficient, but what about more effective? And if we broaden the conversation on non-compliance like we did before and say, no, this includes mistakes, it includes errors, it includes omission, duplication, all of these things. Simple reality is everything that comes into Concur automatically is something that I don't have to hand enter into the system. That's less room for error. So I would argue actually that automation probably has a bigger impact on effectiveness than it does on efficiency. Nonetheless, think of it that way. And then you look at all these individual components of automation, and acknowledge if we want to be more efficient and more effective, which happen to be the top two reasons given, how do we bring this throughout our organization? How do we optimize and maximize automation? We get to the next one on the list, which is that single source reporting. To be able to compare travel and expense and make sure that we are that things are congruent and compliant. Yes, having one source of reporting matters, but keep in mind it's effectiveness, but it's also efficiency. It's a lot easier one report than three and manage all that detail. So how do we maximize that as Concur clients? I'm going to do number 3 and number 4 together because they're highly related. On the back end, when we look at the fact that the itinerary, card feed, hotel folios, all of these coming together for that cross-check validation on the audit side, how do we ensure that we have as much of that information as possible? Because it's going to make us more effective and it's going to make us more efficient as well. So trying to just make sure we all really see these as dual-sided, that their effectiveness and their efficiency as well. Finally is our app center ecosystem. We can have the same conversation here. We can look at every single product, and I'm going to encourage you to look at everything that our partner apps provide, whether you have those apps or not, and just ask those questions. Are these making me more efficient? Are they making me more effective? I think the answer is going to be yes on all of those. And then it comes into the point of, okay, how do I get the most out of these tools? Whether they're Concur tools or partner apps or whatever it may be, how do I optimize that? And in a minute, we're going to get to why. We're going to kind of talk through the financial side of how important this really is in order to really do that well. This leads me to what I call the 3 I's. I talk about these a lot: infrastructure, insight, and internal controls. You'll notice that insight is highlighted on this slide, and here's why. If we want to use our infrastructure to improve behavior, to improve the way we do things, we need insight to be able to make that determination. We need to know, where do we have pain that we can solve for just with the infrastructure itself. It starts with that insight and understanding. The same thing on internal controls. Part of why I put insight first is because we really can't control what we can't see. And like I said earlier, what you don't know can hurt you. So from a controls perspective, from an infrastructure perspective, it's just critical that we have a full understanding of what's going on in our business and how are these things that we don't know potentially hurting us. Okay, so that's kind of going to be the theme. And let's start with that. Let's get into some insight that we have. What I'm going to do now is put up a few items of concern or challenges that we all face, and we're going to answer 4 questions. Number 1, does it matter? Does what I just shared with you even matter to your organization? And we're probably going to talk about, if not, why should it? Number 2, do I know it? Now we're going to pause on this a little bit. I'm going to ask some questions, but share with you some of the things that I tend to see as I do value engagements with clients. Do I know what this looks like in my organization? And we're going to look at all of those things. Now, if the answer is does it matter? If the answer to that is no, you'll have time to get a cup of coffee and take a little break, because it's got to matter. And if not, then we move on. If it matters, do I know it? Can I fix it? And the key here is that if you don't know it, you can't fix it, which is why I focus so heavily on insight. And then if I can fix it, is it worth fixing? And again, just because I can fix it doesn't mean I should. And so we really do have to kind of unpack that and say, okay, what's the value of fixing it? What's the value of not fixing it? What's the harm in not fixing it? So that's what we're going to kind of talk to. And we're actually going to quantify this near the end of the thing. We're going to do a little bit of math. I've always read, don't do math on a big presentation, but you know what? I'm going to break the rules. We're going to do some math. So prepare for that coming up. Let's talk about some individual areas. And when I get into something like a big category like spend optimization, notice I didn't say compliance, because I believe it goes way, way beyond following the rules. Spend optimization. And we look at 4 different areas. We're going to break these down a little bit: entertainment, gifts, incidentals, and mileage. And this list is very long. We're just going to talk about 4 of them. Let's walk through these. First of all, entertainment spend. I will tell you, entertainment spend is kind of risky because we usually have attendees. We want to track those attendees. So my question is, does it matter to you? Here's what I tend to see: a lot of entertainment spend, a lot of it, is booked through Concur as an individual meal. So I will go in and I will see breakfast, and I will see a $700 breakfast. I would love to have that breakfast. It sounds delicious, but we know that's probably not a single breakfast. There's probably attendees in that meeting. So I'll ask the question, does it matter? To me, it matters an awful lot, because many organizations will scrutinize attendee spend, because we don't want to be on the front page of the newspaper as whining and dining someone who we probably shouldn't be whining and dining. Sometimes it's just an oops, I made a mistake. I put it in breakfast, even though it was a client entertainment. I've seen this number as high as 5%, not of meal spend, but of overall spend. Some clients, this is a really big deal for them. There's a lot of entertainment that goes on. Does it matter? I would argue yes. Do I know it is another question. Do you know in your own environment how often this happens? I will tell you, in my 5 years of doing value consulting, I've never seen it not happen. It is something that we run into. Can I fix it? The answer to that is, if you don't know it, the answer is no, you can't. You have to know it in order to fix it. And then, is it worth fixing? That's a question for you. I can't really answer that on your behalf, but I believe it is for most organizations. And when we transition into gifts, number 2 on the list, the story is the same. Are gifts happening? Are they happening not in the gift expense type or in a gift type expense type? In other words, is it kind of hidden from my view? Do I know how often that happens? Can I fix it? Is it worth fixing? And part of why I focus on entertainment and gifts is not that they're the biggest category necessarily, but when it gets to the is it worth fixing question, all it takes is one bad experience to get noticed and get on the front page of the newspaper, and nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. Incidental spend, what I typically see, I will look at the hotel expense type. I will look at the hotel tax expense type. I would expect the hotel tax expense type to be roughly 10% of the hotel expense type. Why? When you look at hotel folios, that's generally what you see is 8, 9, 10, 12, 14%, depending on if you're a resort town or where you are, but it's a significant amount. So when I see 3% of all hotel spend is recorded as hotel tax, there's a disconnect there. And even if you don't care about taxes being done properly, what else is missing? Is there minibar? Are there movies? Is there parking? And again, you can have that question. It's not worth fixing, but I think we start here. Do I know what this looks like in my organization? Can I fix it? Yes, if you know it. Is it worth fixing? That's the question for you. But these are 4 areas in spend optimization out of about 30. I've got a really long list of things that I look for just to kind of give us a feel for this big bucket called spend optimization. Then we get into tax and regulatory. This gets a little more interesting in a lot of ways. What I like to look for is in-country or out-of-country VAT. And I know a lot of people on this call may or may not have anything to do with VAT reclaim, and that's okay. Here's the reality of it. You are in a really good position to impact your company's, your organization's success on VAT reclaim, because we have the data. We have the data. What I typically see is this: there's 108 countries, according to the U.S. Council on International Business, that levy some sort of VAT tax or GST tax, or it's named different things, but in essence, it's a value-added tax. It differs in country or out of country. When I do the analysis, clients are typically surprised that they have as much spend happening as many countries as they do. Because again, oftentimes it's really not on our plate, quote, so to speak, but we have that information. Does it matter? Yes, it's your money. Do I know it? If you don't, you could. The information is there. Can I fix it? Yes, because I can know it. Is it worth fixing? I would add another question: is it my job to fix here? But the reality is, you've got a lot of power here. You've got a lot of data. You've got a lot of insight that you can use to impact what is a very big situation. When we get to taxable employee benefits, it's very, very similar. There's a couple of differences. Number one is employee taxable benefits are not saying, hey, we're not able to reclaim this money that's ours. It's more in the risk category that the IRS is getting more and more focused on taxable employee benefits. How are we doing? Does this matter to me? For years, I think the answer was no to that for many of us. And I think more and more organizations are starting to answer this doesn't matter question. Yes, it does matter. And I talk to organizations all the time and say, hey, Bill, I got this. We understand this. We've got our employee trip, the incentive trip that we go to, the President's Club trip, as some call it. That's all goes through people, that goes through payroll. We've got this. But what about the other stuff? And the other stuff is a really long list of things that potentially are taxable. And I find them in 20, 30, 40 different expense types where you just see it happening there. So the question I would have for you on taxable employee benefits is the same. Does it matter? I believe it does, but that's for you to determine. Do I know it? And my answer that I've seen with more organizations that I deal with, the answer to this is no. I don't know how prevalent this is. Can I fix it? Yes, if you know it. Is it worth fixing? That's a whole nother question. But it's a big area. It's a growing area of concern. And it kind of steers back to all these things being related. There's a behavioral component here. There's a compliance component here. There's an overall understanding of what's happening. We see a lot of spend that there's no country designation at all. So we don't know. And those are the types of things that can really have an impact on our organization. The final big topic we're going to talk about today is internal controls. And we could spend an hour on internal controls. I've been known to talk for over an hour on internal controls. But when we talk about internal controls, oftentimes we think audit. And audit is clearly part of internal controls. But I like to look at it a little, let's take a step back and say, what about pre-spend? What about pre-approval? What about prepayment? All these different areas. Are we driving behavior? Are we eliminating the opportunity for bad behavior? Once it's happened, are we looking at receipts? What percentage are we looking at? What are we looking at? Who's looking at them? And those questions are kind of painful. And I have these conversations with the clients every day. And when we look at the data on how many receipts are being looked at and how many are not being looked at, I always pose the question first. When you talk about your managers, frontline, what percentage of the receipts do you think that they're viewing? And I get the same number every time. They say, probably not very much. True. How much? Because again, I think it's important to know these things. How much? And they'll usually throw a number at me, and it's usually a lot worse than what they fear. And so we have those conversations. Then we talk about what they're looking at. Are they looking at higher risk items? Are they not? What are they doing once they find stuff? Oftentimes the answer is we're not doing very much. We value the employee experience. Who's doing it? So there's all these questions. Does it matter? Absolutely. It absolutely matters for a number of reasons. Do I know what it looks like? Maybe or may not. Can I fix it? Yes, there's multiple ways you can fix it with internal controls. There's multiple different areas of Concur where we can have an impact on that. And finally, is it worth fixing? Again, that's a question for you. But we're going to show you near the end of this how to make the financial determination if it's worth it. And I'm going to say this a couple of times just to be clear. This is not all about the money. And there's so many reasons to do things so many different ways. And I believe financially that's one of them, but it's not all about the money. So is it worth fixing? Let's expand that. Are these worth fixing? Not just these individual components, but we look at these big buckets of spend optimization, tax and regulatory, and internal controls. Are they worth spend? Are they worth improving? Leads us into our next poll question. Of these three insight areas we're talking about, which one do you think would create the most value for your organization? Spend optimization, tax and regulatory policies, or internal controls? And once again, I'm going to pause for a second here and let you answer that question, and we'll reveal that in just a second. Not surprisingly, as you're probably seeing a trend here, I believe they're all important. I also believe that they are all somewhat related in many ways. So we're going to give that a second to populate. See, about a third of you have answered. Now it's up to about half. I feel like Big Brother watching the numbers go up here. So, all right, good deal. We're well over half, so we're going to go ahead and reveal those answers. Internal control is 50%. Spend optimization 41. Tax and regulatory policies 8.6. I didn't know what to expect here. I thought it would be the first and the third would be the leader. I suspect a lot of people didn't put tax and regulatory policies on their list because it's not part of their jurisdiction per se. They're not held accountable for that. That is something that we're really trying to alter a little bit at SAP Concur, because we do feel like people in your shoes have a really great opportunity to impact that. Very good stuff. Interesting. Let's go to talk about another question that's related. Of the three insight areas we talked about, spend optimization, tax and regulatory internal controls, where are you lacking the insight to make impactful change? And again, we believe that insight is so critical to be able to make any changes. So of these three, where do you feel least empowered from an insight perspective to have an impact? See the answers rolling in. Well, I'm going to give this a second. I'll wait till we get to at least halfway there, and then we will review the answers. And I also have my suspicions as to what this number will look like as well, and we'll see if I'm right on that one. All right, coming up on halfway there for participation. All right, we are at 50%. Let's take a look. All right, I was kind of right. I thought tax and regulatory would be the top one. I thought it'd be even more than that. Honestly, I thought this would be closer to 60%. And maybe if we had paused and waited long enough, we would have gotten to that area. But this is good stuff. This is helpful for me, and it kind of fits in overall with the conversation today and how these all kind of come together. Now we're going to slow down a little bit, and we're going to talk about some math. And again, if you don't have a math mind, please don't tune me out here. I'm trying not to throw too many numbers at you. But here's my reality in the job that I do. And I'm going to share this with you via an experience that I had recently. I was presenting to about 35 people in one of our largest clients, very, very large client. And the room was full of people with different interests and different persona, within their organization that are all impacted by SAP Concur in some way. And I started my presentation with this. I asked the question, how much value are you getting from SAP Concur? And I'm going to ask you on this call today that same question. In fact, feel free to chat in some of your reactions to any of this, because that was the question I asked. I will tell you there was probably a good minute of awkward silence. And somebody finally said, a lot. And I said, how much? Give me a number. And there was more awkward silence. And the more I thought through that, the more I realized it behooves us, all of us, to be able to answer that question. What is Concur worth for our organization? How much value are we getting out of SAP Concur? Now, one of the people in the room said, Bill, why would you ask that? We have no desire to leave. We know it's a good system for us. We know it is awesome. I think it behooves us all to be able to answer that question and be able to answer it confidently. So I set out then to have this conversation to try and drive at that conversation point of how much value are you getting for Concur? I did it for two reasons. Number one is I think it's valuable to know that. Number two, how are we going to determine if improvement matters? And we have to know where we are right now. So that was kind of the whole reason why I started to go down this path. I have this conversation with existing clients. I have it with people who do not yet have Concur. And it starts with this. Let's understand what things look like before we had Concur so that we can then have a value of improvement that we can comfortably state with people. So I'm going to ask you to step back for a minute, if you have Concur, most on the call do, and say, what did this look like before Concur? How messy of a process did we have? And I've been researching this question for 10 years, and it's hard. And what I find is this: data is all over the map. I've seen as low as $16 for what a common, what a process could cost, as high as $58. Most people don't have a number in their brain. So when I ask this question, I usually get the same response: gosh, I don't know. I don't know. So I'm going to challenge you to kind of think through, before you had Concur, how messy of a process was this? And some people look at $58 and think that's kind of crazy. It's certainly not that high. Here's what that research looked like. It's from HRS and GBTA Foundation that kind of came together, and they did some surveys. This goes back a few years. But they talk about the hidden costs, all the costs, including overhead. You know, all these things, if we really, really unpack this, they came up with $58. They came up with 20 minutes it takes for a user, without a lot of automation, on average, so again, this is an average, to do an expense report. They also acknowledge that 19% of all expense reports go through the system more than once as they go through the audit process. And there's more costs added. So I've got a number in my mind. I'm going to share that with you in a minute. But I think it's something we really need to wrap our arms around. And when we do that, we look at an improvement number, and this is a number I am comfortable quoting. Above the line here, what did this cost you before? I don't know you. You know yourselves. You may not even be able to answer this question. But what we can say is that IDC research from, I think it was last year, we can include this if you guys want to follow up on this, we'll send this to you, looked at a bunch of different areas and came up with 48% as the improvement number, that clients who have Concur, who are comfortable articulating how much value they've gotten out of it, use 48% improvement. And I think that's a pretty powerful number. When we shift gears now and look at the effectiveness side, things get a little harder. Because again, I think the big thing to understand here is, if we knew where all this stuff was happening, we'd stop it. So I'm going to give you a couple of bits of information to share on how I help put this into perspective. Again, what we talked about earlier, not making this seem worse or better than it actually is. Here's a number that we see kind of year in and year out. The ACFE every year does a report to the nations, and it's about fraud. And consistently, they use the number 5%. 5% of revenue is fraud. And when you dive into this report and get under the hood and you start reading through it, at one point it said 21% of fraud is expense spend. Now, I almost should put an asterisk by there, because there's a lot of things it says about expense spend. You know, there's different numbers. It depends on the size of the organization. So it's kind of one of those things that, you know, this is a good guideline. This is a good perspective, but what does it look like in our organization? The other challenge with this number for me is that most of us deal with the spend side, not necessarily the revenue side. So what I'm going to share with you today is this. I view fraud as the tip of the iceberg. And in all of my dealings, all these years, all the research I've done, I'm comfortable saying, of our expense spend, when you do include mistakes, bad decisions, fraud, all of these things, the most reasonable number I've come to is 2 to 5% in general is what our non-compliance or our non-optimal spend looks like. I will tell you, I did this webinar about 2 years ago, and I put the poll question out there, and the answer was 5% or higher was the number one response. So it is a big problem. And I do think it's important to come up with something that we're comfortable with. Cash spend, there's not that validation going in. There's not a card feed going in. So there's a little higher risk there. I generally use 5 to 10% to try and figure out what the status quo looks like, or what pre-concur looks like. Mileage, I hear referred to as the wild, wild west, that, you know, we've heard horror stories on mileage. It is the least documented, highest estimated spend that we have. And we know that people don't estimate their mileage low. That's a known. So we kind of come back to the top of the line here. You know, how much do we have? Really, really challenging. It's a really difficult number to try and wrap our arms around. The bottom of the equation, I'm comfortable with as well. The same IDC research that interviewed clients of ours and said, what happens to compliance under SAP Concur? And the number that they've come up with is a 32% improvement in following company policy, which is the number one thing responded to in our survey today was company compliance. And I think when you take it a step further and say beyond compliance, how about optimization? Yes, we're following the rules. That's awesome. But should Bill have taken a $500 flight when a $300 flight would have sufficed? Both compliant. One is more optimal than the other. So the top of the line is kind of difficult, but I do think it's critical that we understand these things. And part of being able to articulate the value we're getting out of Concur is evaluating where we were and where we are now. So here's an exercise that I like to go through. And it really is simple math. So again, if you're not a math person, I'll hopefully won't make you crazy here. But if I look at an organization that's got 80 million in spend, 125,000 expense reports, that's kind of the method out. That's kind of the target for this example. What did it look like pre-Concur for you to process an expense report? And I use $50. Some people tell me I'm higher than I should be. Some people say I'm lower than I should be. My experience tells me that a manual process is an expensive process. And most people that come to Concur to automate a process, and then they start to see the value of all the other things that we offer from a compliance standpoint. My challenge to you is this is one of 6 variables. There's only 6 variables. If you want to be able to answer the question, what is Concur worth to me right now? This is one of 6 variables. Okay, so I'm going to challenge you, not necessarily today, but to think through this, because this is a key component of that process. Number 2, pre-Concur, how much time was spent doing an expense report? Also a difficult question. A road warrior, 20 minutes would be a dream come true. For an occasional user, that would be a nightmare, and anywhere in between. I do remember when I traveled a lot before I had an automated system for myself to use, I would tell you 20 minutes is really, really low. It probably took an hour to do an expense report for me when I was traveling a lot and before I had access to an automated tool. But again, we're going to talk about the improvement here. So I think it is important to really wrap our arms around, well, what does this look like? What did it look like before? So we're going to get to the improvement in just a second. Next one is the hourly rate of that person doing that expense report. What are we paying them per hour? I use a random number of $45. Again, feel free to tell me I'm way high, way low. I do understand the president of the company is making more than $45. I also understand that the president of the company probably is not doing his or her own expense reports. I get all that. We see the majority of the users being salespeople or traveling people, and they tend to make a decent salary. But again, this is a number I use as a placeholder. It's really up to you. It is a variable, and it is an important variable for this little exercise. Next up is estimated non-compliance. And this is probably the hardest number to evaluate. I use 7.5%, and here's why. Of the generally accepted 2 to 5% range for general, my experience has been that that's low. My experience has said that 2 to 5 may be the right grouping, but I lean to think it's more like 5. And I do this a lot because of the non-congruence that I see. When I have the ability to work with a client and I see the complexity and the messiness of the data, it leads me to believe that it's probably in that 5% range. Well, Bill, why do you have 7.5% there? Good question. Cash spend is riskier. There's not the automatic feed into Concur. If I'm using a corporate card and I buy something and I get repaid for it in my expense report, when I return it to the vendor, perhaps that credit comes to me. There's challenges there. There's not the data coming in for non-corporate card spend than there is card spend. Most organizations have a pretty significant amount of spend that's not on a corporate card. Then we get to mileage, And again, this number of 7.5% that I like to use as an average is a number that's related to what I generally see in the amount and the levels of mileage spend. Organizations have a lot of mileage. Some have as high as 30% of their spend is mileage. So if I'm an organization in that category that I have that much spend that's happening in mileage, if I don't have the controls in place, if I don't have the automation in place, it's probably kind of interesting to take a look at what that looks like. On the previous slide, when I looked at spend optimization, I talked about mileage. Here's what I tend to see in mileage. I tend to see large chunks of mileage. Here's a request for a $700 mileage reimbursement. And what do we know about that? We know that it's not a trip. It's probably a month of driving. There's not itemization. There's not any route data in there. A user is just saying, I need $700, and there's no real validation behind that. And that's scary, and that's messy. And that's not something that we should have a lot of confidence in if we're not scrutinizing that spend a little bit more. So I'm comfortable with 7.5%, but again, none of this is about me and what I'm comfortable with. I want to make that really, really clear. What I am comfortable with are the last two, the 48 and the 32. What I'm comfortable with is that the research study is accurate, that those people who said, we know what kind of efficiency improvement we've gotten, and it's 48%, I'm comfortable with that. I don't know where your organization was before Concur. You may have come from a very automated system, in which case you're getting the value from Concur, but maybe it's not 48% because you started higher than the rest. Maybe you started lower than the rest and it's more than 48%. So again, these are just kind of a guidelines to put value into perspective. Here's where it gets fun for me. Once we have these determined in our head, once we're comfortable with these, it is simple math. And again, sorry for all the numbers here, guys. We'll walk through them kind of one at a time. $50 times 125,000. What is that? If you agree that your cost before Concur was $50 per expense report running it through the system, if you do 125,000 expense reports reading left to right on the top of the screen, that's $6,250,000. Okay. The $15 represents that user. 20 minutes at $45 an hour is $15. So if you're paying someone $15 for every expense report times 125,000, that means that your pre-Concur cost of what you're paying the user to build the expense report was $1,875,000, or a total of $8,152,000. So this is the way just to say, what did this process cost me before? And oftentimes they go through this exercise with a client and they see that $8 million, like, no, Bill, that's too high. We got to cut that in half. And my response is always this: no, don't arbitrarily cut it in half. You need to go to the left of the screen and look at those variables that are there. Which of those don't you agree with? Because it is simple math. It is simple math. So this will get you to think through how much time and money was spent running our program before Concur, $8,125,000. And if we agree that there's a 48% improvement, 48% improvement of $8.1 million is 3.9. It's a lot. In this number, again, when I get people to confront this, it's usually kind of shocking. And even if you go back after the fact, so I'm gonna challenge you, if you do this exercise at your organization, don't show this first. Let's take off the dollar amount, take off the math, and just get complete agreement on these numbers, and then hit the button and show it and do the math. The same thing on the effectiveness side. This one's a little easier, a little less math. If you agree that 7.5% of your spend is non-compliant, it's simple math. 7.5% times $80 million is $6 million. And that's kind of scary. So when people say, oh, it's only 5%, it's only 3%, it's only 7.5%, 7% is 7%, but it's for a large organization that's in the millions of dollars. And again, what we talked about is the juice worth the squeeze. You know, if we're going to determine, is it worth doing this better, we need to know what it looks like right now. So if we have 7.5% of that spend is non-compliant, that's $6 million. And if we are comfortable that we can improve that by 32%, 32% of $6 million is $1,920,000. It is really, really simple math. And when we look at the efficiency improvement of 3.9 million, we add in the 1.9 million for effectiveness, that's $5.82 million, $5,820,000. And it is fun when I have these conversations with clients when I hear them, oh, it can't be $5.8 million. It is. And again, so long as the left hand of the screen here, those variables are accurate, you can look at that number and be comfortable. And when somebody asks you, where did you come up with the $5.8 million? Well, it's easy. We calculated the cost of how long this process took us before we had Concur. And we believe we've gotten a 48% improvement. And that 48% improvement, that's nearly $4 million of the 5.8. And we understand that we've improved our compliance by 32%. And when we think about how messy things were versus now, we see nearly $2 million of improvement there for $5.8 million. Boom. So I think it's important to be comfortable with that. I'm going to now drop back to the original part of the conversation. The whole idea here is not show me the value of Concur. That wasn't part of the presentation. That wasn't part of the headline here. Here's why it's part of the content. As I said earlier, I believe that there are so many non-financial reasons to improve Concur. Some of them are related to risk. Some are related to efficiencies. Some are the employee experience. People are doing jobs that they're not good at, not comfortable with, don't want to be doing. All these reasons. Some of it is simply a due diligence that we just don't want to be seen as not having full control over the situation. There's a lot of good reasons to want to improve. Financial is one of them. So I think it's important then to understand where you were, where you are right now. And once you understand and are comfortable where you are right now, here's where I think it helps you make that decision moving forward. So let's assume I go through this exercise. Either I do the math like I did it on the screen today or use a different methodology. Doesn't matter to me. What matters is that you're comfortable with what these numbers tell you, that you can confidently state this, because here's why. When I say in my organization that we've done the research, we've done the analysis, and we believe that our process costs us $1 million a year. That also allows you to say, what does a 10% improvement look like? 10% of $1 million is $100,000. So now you're in a situation where if your goal is to be more efficient, which was number 2 on the list today, if it's to be more efficient, then you can look at improvement options, whether that's products from Concur, whether that's internal rearrangements, whether it's configuration changes within Concur, whatever that improvement looks like, it costs you money. And oftentimes people think, yeah, you know what, if I can just do this myself, it doesn't cost me anything. Go back to the definition of value. That's not true. Any resources that you're committing, any time you're spending to solve a problem is costing you something. And I believe, again, cost is not the whole answer. I believe that it behooves you to have the give versus the get. Have a number for each of those. So I would look at an improvement option and say, if I can save 1 minute out of 10, 10%, 1 minute out of 10, I want to know that's $100,000. And if I see something that's going to cost me $20,000 to get there, it's simple math. Same thing on the effectiveness side. I think it's important to understand how much non-compliant spend do I have, so that when you look at strategies to reduce that non-compliant spend, it's important to be able to know if I can reduce non-compliant spend by 1%, what does that look like? How much is that? Is the juice worth the squeeze? Hopefully I didn't lose you in all of the numbers. I actually had a lot more in my screen prior to this, and I was asked to take them out. No, I didn't. I took them out by myself because I don't want to make this about the numbers. But I do think someone in your organization is going to ask that question. Should we do this? Is the juice worth the squeeze? And in the hundreds of clients where I have walked through value engagements and really gotten under the hood and tried to make that determination, the answer is almost always yes. So again, hopefully this was beneficial for you moving forward. I'm going to go ahead and ask one more poll question, and then we're going to open it up for questions. And it is this: would you like to talk to someone at SAP Concur about optimizing your system? So feel free to answer that. If the answer is no, that's okay. We just want to make sure that people are really, really clear that we are here to help. We do care. We want you happy. We want you successful. My whole team, our whole goal is to help organizations go from good to great. That we want to see incremental changes happening and moving forward in a really solid way. And sometimes it includes just a little bit of support, encouragement. Sometimes it increases some strategies. We do a lot of user groups and things where we bring clients together to try and really encourage them to share best practices and work together. And what we find is that rarely do people have unique problems. You know, we all kind of struggle with the same things. I went through a lot. I went through it kind of quickly. I don't know if there's been a lot of questions asked, so that at that point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to the moderator, and let's see if we have some questions.
All right, so it does look like we've had a few questions roll in. We do have some time set aside for questions, so please feel free to use the Q&A box to submit your questions for Bill. All right, Bill, the first question says, do I need to buy services in order to improve?
Oh, getting right to the heart of the matter here. I like it. I like the direct question. No. Next question. No, I'm kidding. I'll expand on my answer a little bit. No, you really don't. And here's what I love about Concur. When you look at all the things that I talked about, when I talked about spend optimization, I just threw up 4 categories, you know, the incidental spend, meals, entertainment spend, gift spend, mileage. You have the ability within Concur to impact all of those things. And you can do it through any one of the 3 I's, the infrastructure, the insights, or the internal controls. You have the tools that are needed. Why I love having the conversation of value, why I always talk about the give versus the get is this. I'm gonna do this via an example. As I look at clients and their infrastructure, almost every client has our intelligence module, the reporting module. Very, very rarely do I see an organization that doesn't have intelligence. Intelligence comes with a lot of standard reports. I believe that the way you go from good to great is having super in-depth, particular knowledge about your organization. And I believe custom reporting and dashboards, particularly to be able to have that glance of what's going on in your organization, are just critical. Can you build those on your own? Yes. If you have intelligence, you can build those on your own. This gets into that give versus the get. Should I spend time and money and resources learning how to build my own custom reports? Or should I turn to Concur, who has people that do that for a living, that's their sole focus? So for me, this whole conversation we had today, part of it is to help answer that question. So here's how I would answer that question. Hopefully everybody agrees that the more insight we have, the better decisions we can make. If not, then kind of tune out, because I believe that to be the case. And that's kind of the core of what I've done for the last 10 years here. If you believe that, then you have to think through from an effectiveness and efficiency side. Should I just learn how to use Cognos better so that I can spend my time building reports? Or should I buy that from Concur and have experts do that on my behalf? And I will tell you that my answer is I don't have a vested interest in that. I have a vested interest in making sure that everyone who uses Concur has the insights needed to be able to drive behavior, drive performance. And if you can do that on your own, do it on your own. But I think you will find that having an expert do it on the side is probably a better value for you. But again, it gets back to that equation. And if you can do it on your own without having to pay money, in essence, you're going to pay yourself because you're taking the time to do it, versus us, that to me is not relevant. What's relevant is that you have full faith in your data and you can use that in a very actionable way to drive performance. I will also put a little caveat in there. If it's something you do on your own, please build dashboards, because dashboards are probably the most powerful way just to have a snapshot right in front of you. You don't have to run a report. You don't have to figure things out. It's right at your fingertips. So those are all things away. Our account teams can help you make that decision better. They can show you what you get when you have our products. You can figure out what it would look like to get there without the products. But again, it starts with understanding that there is a need to improve, that it's a value that's worth improving, and then how do you move forward from
there? Awesome.
Good question.
Thanks, Bill. The next question says, I think the cost of a report is low. Newly implemented Concur, and people don't listen to training information and don't use the automation correctly. How can you assist in managing this?
Wow. Give me the fun part of that question again, please.
It says, I think the cost of a report is low. Newly implemented Concur, and people don't listen to training information and don't use the automation correctly.
Wow. That's a great question. That's a great question. I'm going to answer it. I'm going to take the easy way out on the answer. And I would say talk to your account team. Here's why. Even experienced users of Concur, when I get in and look at their data, I'm like, wow, there's a lot going on here. Very large, very complex, very difficult, very overwhelming. What we've seen since COVID is we need to do more with less. There are tools within Concur that can help that. Again, it gets back into it. I would answer the question this way. Do you know where these problems are taking place? If the answer to that is yes, can I solve for it? And is it worth solving for? So that question is a great question. It goes right back to, do you understand the size and the scope of the problem that you're having? Because there's data to be able to show you that. And if you don't know it, I would suggest getting into Cognos and running some reports to find it. If you don't have the ability to run custom reports, talk to us, because it starts with that insight. It starts with understanding that. There are a lot of tools within Concur. There's a lot of things you can do with your configuration to help drive performance. In essence, I can't make a mistake here. I'm not going to book a flight for first class because, look, it doesn't even show up as an option for me in Concur. Flip side of that is, well, then I'm going to go outside of Concur and book this so I can get away with it. Those are the types of things that we just need to curtail. And when your account team talks about, Concur travel adoption as an example, the more people are booking through Concur, the better visibility you have into that spend, the more you can see where there are problems happening, the more where you can use infrastructure to stop that from happening as an option. And then on the back end, having the internal controls to be able to catch it and do something about it. So a very good question, a very long potential answer, but this is what we're here for. So I would encourage you to take that up with your account team. Again, we have products that literally are just there just to help drive user behavior. And when we get into mergers and acquisitions and we get into some of the things that we're seeing here, sometimes this is as easy as holding someone's hand through the process. We've got tools to do that as well. So your account team will kind of unpack that really good question and try and get to the bottom of it. What's at the core of that problem so that we can address the illness versus the symptom. But I love the question. I wish we had an hour to talk about that. But great question.
Yes. Keep the questions rolling in all. The next question says, what are the tools that Concur offers to generate that added value?
Wow. I thought these questions would be easy. You didn't tell me they'd be hard questions. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but at risk of that, I will. It really depends on what the business problems are. It really depends on what insights we have. I sometimes look at it from high dollar opportunity for improvement to low dollar opportunity for improvement. Sometimes I look at it at a risk perspective, high risk to low risk. So I would say it really starts with, what is your desired outcome? What do you want to solve for? Is it we need to be more financially viable and we just need to cut back? We hear that all the time. Bill, we're not worried about A, B, or C. The bottom line is our organization's revenues are down. We're struggling. We've got to curtail expenses. That's our goal. In that case, you may want to look at the bigger dollar spend versus the smaller dollar spend. It may be a situation where you don't have the internal controls in place and that you're concerned that you're going to have a breach of confidence, that we're going to be caught whining and dining a lobbyist or something to that example. Could be. So it depends on the road of the outcome. It just makes sense, I think, if it's dollars, if we're just like, hey, look, we're getting a little upside down here with our spend. Start with those larger dollar areas. What I will tell you is this: once you isolate what your goal is to fix, to solve for, SAP Concur has a number of tools that can help reduce that. I have a bias towards knowledge, which is why I talk about insight throughout this entire conversation. It's also something to talk to about how do we help set the configuration up, travel rules, audit rules, in a way that's going to do a lot of that work for us. And most of those are tools that are within Concur. So reach out to your account team and have those conversations. Ask the difficult questions, because that's kind of where the rubber hits the road.
Awesome. The next question says, getting other departments and leaders to review reporting is very helpful. The data is their intelligence. Do you have any recommendations on how to approach these conversations?
So I'm going to have to read a little bit into that question. I think part of it is making people care. It's kind of how I heard that question. That's a hard one too. So again, I thought these questions would be a little easier than that. That's a great question though. I believe, this is my experience, that part of why a lot of people don't care, I'm going to use air quotes here, kind of in the realm of that question, is because they haven't done what we did in that last exercise. They haven't sat down and determined financially, how big of a deal is this? So that's part of it for me, is what I've seen. The other part of that is, the flip side of that is, many organizations will see I've got $80 million in spend, and 1% improvement just doesn't move the needle. It just doesn't move the needle. That's a rounding error. That's not material for us to take action. My response to that would be, if it's a very minimal action needed to get that minimal improvement, maybe it's worthwhile. The big thing that's changed recently in regards to that question is that since 2020, we've seen such a reduction of staff. And when I talk to clients every day, what I hear constantly is, we just don't have enough people. We just can't look at every receipt. We can't look at every expense item that goes through the system. We just can't do it. There's the can't do it, and there's the don't have the resources to do it. So sometimes it's just a matter of really getting to the bottom of what are our outcomes. And if our outcomes are, we need to spend less money, great. You can do two things. You can have a travel ban and just say, hey, everybody stop traveling. The top line and the bottom lines are a little off whack, just stop traveling. Usually there's a better way to do that. And usually it's just to say, one thing that's constant is, we don't want to waste money. And it's not always easy to determine where that is, but it's just that goal. So I guess long way of saying, you got to find out who it is that's not engaged, what's going to get them engaged. And guys, I got to be honest with you, that's a question that we have at Concur all the time. When we talk about VAT reclaim as an example, we really struggle to find people within the organizations that we support that care a lot about VAT reclaim, because it's usually handled off-site. So the question that was just asked, which is a great one, we get asked that a lot as well internally. How do we talk to organizations, many of you who are on this call today, and say, this is important? Who do we need to talk to? Well, we have somebody in Europe that does VAT reclaim, but they don't want to talk to us. They're not interested in talking to us. So we struggle with that same question. It's a matter of finding out what is that driver that's going to get them to the phone or to a meeting room or to read an email. So whoever asked that question, if you figure it out, please send it to me, because we would love to have that answer as well. It's a tough question.
All right. It looks like the next question says, how can I better evaluate the data from my Concur platform to know where I have the opportunity to optimize?
Whew. Okay. This one is not as hard for me. How's that for an answer? It's something you're kind of surprised to see. I will tell you how I do it. And I'm not a reporting expert. I'll just tell you guys that right now. What I like to do is just run a single report out of Concur. And it has the expense type. It has the, just trying to think through this, expense type, the business purpose. It's got the date, the dollar amount. And when you run a report like this, and the payment type, is it cash or is it card? And this to me is just a really practical way to do things. And just to sort it and look at it and say, okay, let's start with cash. Large to small, what spend items are happening outside of our corporate card payment type? Because when we look at cash spend, what we see a lot of it is things that are legit. When I look at like my cell phone bill, for instance, I can't put that on a corporate card. I have to pay that and get reimbursed for it. Makes sense. A $3,000 airfare, every major credit card is accepted by every major airline. So I look at it and say, well, it probably doesn't make sense that that's on cash. So that's one that I maybe want to kind of identify a little bit. At one point, I saw a $3,000 breakfast at a home improvement store. And was it non-compliant? Don't know. Was it bad behavior? Don't know. Was it just a mistake? Don't know. But what we do know is that Home Depot does not sell breakfast. And if they did, it's not $3,000. So there's something going on here. So a lot of it is just looking for anomalies. The beauty of it is we can determine what are the things that matter to us, what do we want to better manage and monitor, and how can we have a report that feeds that to us via dashboard, for instance, to be able to say, oops, here was a breakfast for $800. This is probably not right. We have a new product called Walk Me that you guys may be aware of, that when I, as an expense report submitter, put in a $300 breakfast, it's going to ask the question, is this really an individual breakfast? And help guide me toward putting that in the right place. So again, it goes back to insight, understanding how big that problem is. When I know it, I can fix it. Is it worth fixing? Because there's always multiple ways to fix problems like that.
All right. I am going to give one last call for questions. And while we wait to see if we have any last minute stragglers, Bill, do you have any closing or final thoughts?
Yeah, I do. I mean, when I started this 10 years ago, it's kind of funny. I'm surprised Concur hired me because I went through my interview and I said, the only experience I have is expense reporting is having my wife yell at me that I haven't got my expense reporting on time. I was not using an automated system. I didn't like doing it. It was frustrating. And quite frankly, that's why the founders of Concur built Concur 20 plus years ago. That's how it all started. And over the years, I've gotten such an appreciation for what people do within Concur. I will tell you, if you can see in my video, I don't have a lot of hair there. I'm pretty much out of hair. And I see that, and I see people, my customers I deal with that have a full head of hair. I don't know how they do it. There's so much going on. There's so much complexity. When you start adding in VAT reclaim and taxable employee benefits and all these really super complex things, it's unmanageable. And so a lot of my focus winds up being on internal controls. Because you can't look at everything. It just doesn't make sense. And is the juice worth the squeeze? Probably not. The flip side of that is, if I'm not doing my due diligence and something gets on the front page of the newspaper, I got double problems that I haven't done my due diligence on this. So the biggest thing for me is my appreciation for what people on this call do, how complex it is, and the opportunity you have to improve. I will also say this, I am hopefully many on this call will be at Fusion in March. So we're gonna have a lot of conversations on artificial intelligence. And I'm actually involved with one of those conversations. It's been fascinating for me just to understand my part of it is just talking through all the complexity. You know, I gave just a few examples of a lot. How do we use artificial intelligence to find that needle in the haystack for us? How do we use artificial intelligence to drive behavior and performance within the system? So I'm real excited about the future. Artificial intelligence is scary for a lot of people, but it's super, super powerful. And the ability to use it in a way to use our job better is very exciting. I'm real excited about the future for Concur.
Well, Bill, it looks like you answered all the questions today. To our audience, if you think of a question you want to ask after our time today, please reach out to our team and we will be happy to help you. Once again, I'd like to thank Bill for joining us today. As a reminder, please complete the survey that pops up as you exit the webinar. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.